And he joins us live here on our big program. And you can get the Joe Citizen Show on YouTube and coming soon to any podcast place that you can possibly think of. My goal in 2025 is to make sure that Roger Homefield is doing a weekly show somewhere on the goddamn internet or radio somewhere on the face of this planet. So last time we talked to you, you were battling back from COVID, and you were taking ivermectin and it seemed to work. What is the update?
Well, it seemed to work, but I'm actually a little disappointed because I blew the way I did it, and here I am giving shows, screaming about ivermectin, screaming about the emergency use special use authorization that was abused by the FDA to smear ivermectin so that they could just run with the vaccines. And here, I'm the one that was caught with my pants down and didn't have my supply. When I just started to take for granted I was never going to catch the damn thing, but I finally caught it and I didn't have my supply. And what I did wrong was this. I got supply for one day. And part of it was that it was only one day is because I had to wrestle. I don't want to disparage my doctor. I don't want to get him in trouble. The problem with that, it's not the doctors, although they are a bunch of trained sheep, frankly. But the FDA still has not approved ivermectin for COVID. So the doctors are still in fear. And something was said about, well, here's a supply for dewormer. In other words, it wasn't even for COVID, it was for dewormer. And I didn't know what to think because I was already out of it. I was sick, and being sick, I was out of it, and even a lot less intelligent than I am right now. I really was kind of out of my mind. The bottom line is that I took it for one day, and it knocked it out. It knocked it out completely. It was on a Saturday, and I took it Saturday. I was sick as a dog Saturday, but by Sunday morning, it was completely knocked out. And it was knocked out to the degree that I had Beeper MD come over to the house to test me, only because I felt so good that I was ready to go back and play ball. Yeah. So I wanted Beeper MD to come over and test me to see if I still had it in my system. Is it okay? Is it appropriate for me to go back and play ball? Or do I have to stay home for X days to make sure I don't spread any of the bug? That's how good I felt. Well, guess what? The key, though, was I was out of it. Remember, folks? I mean, I was not just out of my mind, but I was out of ivermectin. And I had nothing to replace it with. And that by that night, it came back. And I had a bad day the next day. And so at that point, I figured I have to take something, and I could not go through the contortions of fighting to get ivermectin, which we shouldn't have to do. So I went with the government-approved Pavloxid, I can't pronounce the damn thing, which, look, it gets you off the deathbed, but it doesn't knock it out. It gets you away from feeling terrible, but it doesn't make you what you were. It doesn't knock it out. So I took that for 2 days, and then finally the ivermectin came. But now it's like, hey, it was no longer a sneak attack with the ivermectin. I mean, I already had taken it for that one day that, bam, it knocked it out. Now I was taking the ivermectin for the second time after I allowed myself to get sick again, which was really a stupid half-assed way of doing things. I have no one to blame but myself. And it may have been a very disastrous error, because right now I'm concerned that I only did it yesterday. It's only for one day that I've taken it so far, and this morning, and one more dose. So I've only taken it yesterday and not all of today. But to me, ivermectin always, it knocks it out, and I'm kind of wandering around in another dimension. I'm not ready to play ball. I feel more, I'm ready to assume my real age, and I'm extremely concerned about that, because I won't be the same person again, ever, if that's going to be the case. So I may have blown it. So folks, don't make the same stupid mistake I did. Get the ivermectin, have it ready. It doesn't hurt you. It doesn't have side effects. And you get it in advance and check all that stuff out in advance. You don't have to be concerned about it at the last second. And so don't be stupid and foolish like I was and not have it. And then have a little bit of it, then you do something else, and then you do it again. That's not how you do it. So sure, I'm not dying, but I'm not dying cleanup tomorrow either. And I don't know if I ever will, frankly. So I'm very distraught about that.
Well, I will have to say that part of the reason why ivermectin has always been, is because at one point, ivermectin became public domain. So the drug companies don't have a way to, copyright it and hold on to it.
Because it didn't cost anything.
Yep.
It cost pennies. It cost pennies.
Yeah.
And I've said this ad nauseum. And I would have loved nothing to come on here and say, oh, it just knocked it out. But I'm convinced that it would have knocked it out as it did knock it out the first time. All I had to do was keep taking it. And that would have been done. It would have been over and done with. And then I was going to really tear into the FDA, which I still will anyway, because it was of the confusion that they created, because they still have not approved it as a COVID drug. That confusion on that second day when I was out of it, when I was out of the drug, and that confusion about not getting more of it without putting my doctor in a bad position or this or that. It's because of that I went through this ridiculous rigmarole and took the Paxlovid and delayed on taking the ivermectin and the emergency use authorization, EUA. It's very clear. Jeff Hayes went over it ad nauseum in the interview that I had with him, an hour interview on JoeCitizenShow.com. It's up there now. It has been. And he explained. And I had the definition. Well, I don't need it. I know it well enough. Essentially, Big Pharma would not have been able to get the emergency use authorization, EUA. They would not have been able to get that, which allowed them to get to the vaccine to market, bing, bang, boom, and bam, get it immediately. They would not have been able to get that if there had been a viable option. Ivermectin was that option. And that was the reason that ivermectin was smeared. Now, Jeff Hayes didn't come up and say that that's why ivermectin was smeared so that Big Pharma... No, because he wasn't going to do that. He doesn't want to get himself sued. He didn't go 1 and 1 is 2. He went 1 and 1. You do the math. Okay? And that's exactly how he presented it. He says, well, I'm not going to say that, but, okay, if they had an option, such as ivermectin, they could not have had the emergency use authorization. It would have cost them hundreds of billions of dollars. And it's just unfathomable. It's something that I never really would have believed was the case, but this, in fact, was the case. And of course, they say, well, yeah, but they didn't have the proper testing. They didn't have the tests. And I asked them those questions. He says, yes, but Fauci was controlling the tests. And they were fudging the tests. And you don't have to take Joe Citizen's word for it. Look up Dr. Harvey Risch. He's the chief epidemiologist at Yale University. And he estimated that 250,000 American lives were lost because they were deterred from or prevented from using ivermectin. Let that sink in, ladies and gentlemen. So we talk about the worst administration of all time. We can talk about Afghanistan and the people being tortured over there and the women that can't talk out loud. Yeah, we can talk about that. We can talk about all the suffering that's going on with the Russia war. We can talk about the atrocities in Israel and all that. All that, thanks to this worst administration of all time, But I don't know that anything tops what they did with ivermectin. The fact that they smeared the drug ivermectin for money. They smeared ivermectin and let 250,000 Americans die a rotten death to where their relatives could not even be with them, so that Big Pharma could foist that stinking vaccine down everybody's throat, whether you wanted it or not. And they can never be allowed to get away with this. I really hope that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. strips the FDA bare. I hope he exposes them. I hope there's a special counsel. I hope that they are exposed for premeditated murder, because that's what that is. It was premeditated. This was not by accident. It was pre-freaking meditated that they're going to fudge tests for ivermectin. They're going to make it a big joke that it's a horse dewormer, blah, blah, blah. Everybody knew the drug had been around for decades and decades, and it didn't have the side effects that they were lying about. They censored everybody. They tried to smear everybody, including heavyweights such as Dr. Harvey Risch. And it was as premeditated as can be. And the tests that they did say, well, no, ivermectin, no, it didn't pass the tests. They fudged those tests, and that's according to Dr. Harvey Risch, Dr. Jeff Hayes, the filmmaker for the real RFK Jr. and the real Anthony Fauci. And I can't think of a more grim, morose activity. You can talk about Stalin, how he killed his people, I suppose. Like this is like right up there. This is the United States of America. And we killed 250,000 Americans. Look, I know this sounds like lunacy. You know, look it up yourself. Look it up yourself. And it's going to come to pass. And thank God with this election, it should come to pass. I really can't imagine that RFK Jr. is going to not let it fly. Because he does in those movies, like I say, Jeff Hayes, that's where this all came out. And Jeff Hayes, as a matter of fact, said that Fauci did the same thing with AIDS, prevented them from having effective drugs that would cost pennies, so that they had to use expensive drugs that weren't that effective. So I don't know what it's going to take for Americans to rise up on their hind legs. And so we not only have that, we not only have 250,000 Americans, we still have the Fauci torture labs for the animals going on. And we know the waste that government does with money, the waste that the government does with everything. And that's the waste that they're applying to the animals in the testing, in the torturing testing of those labs. And those labs have to be shut down. And the sadistic scientists, I'm not saying that all scientists are sadistic, but you know, Dr. Michael Savage brought it up, and I hold a lot of respectability in Dr. Michael Savage. When he says something, I believe it. And he was part of this medical program, and he didn't want to kill these rats. He said, they didn't hurt me, these warm little things. And he said, well, then you're fired. And he said, well, then the girl was doing it, and she enjoyed doing it. And he said, there were a lot of them that enjoy doing it. He said, most of them enjoy doing it. So I say we shut these people down. And I have to temper myself, because for whatever reason, Jiggy, whenever I'm on your show, I let my bad language fly. I don't do that on my own show. And I don't know why I do that on yours. It's kind of like, I feel like, oh no, I'm not really here. I'm out of body experience when I'm on your own show or something. I don't know what it is. So I know what I'm saying is harsh enough. I don't have to embellish it by saying bad words, and I get loud enough. But I'm finding it very difficult to sleep at night, really, when I think about the poor animals. And I'll tell you something else. You know, I love Sean Hannity. I really have. I can't think of anybody that I have followed more than him over the years. And he came up with this, the phrase, you're a great American. I think he's a great American, and I really love him. But I've got to say, I did not agree with something he did and said last night. He had this beautiful gal on from PETA, who, by the way, I would marry in like a blank. She's only, 40 years younger than me. What's a few years, Makeup can make up for that, right? And her point he was challenging you, saying, well, are animals as important as people? Well, she wasn't trying to say that. And she wasn't trying to say that everybody has to become a vegetarian. She was not trying to say that. But she was trying to say, and did say, if you heard her, was that animals have feelings, they have sensitivities, they have emotions, and that if we're going to eat them, we do not have to terrorize them and brutalize them before we actually slaughter them, and we don't have to slaughter them in brutal ways either. I cannot imagine that there are 1,001 ways that we could humanely euthanize these animals. They don't even have to know they're going to be euthanized. Cows are like dogs. They'll rest their big head on your shoulder, and you rub their face, and they will love you. Can't we get that, ladies and gentlemen? And what kind of society do we want to have? Do we want to have a society where we have animals that have feelings and nerve endings and emotions, and they're aware, and we want to terrorize them in their last moments? We want to brutalize and have them like pigs, the way they're raised up until they're slaughtered, to suffer? Yeah. What kind of people are we? I'm not comfortable with this. I'm not comfortable with being part of the human race anymore. In fact, if the aliens are up there, frickin' take me. I volunteer here. I don't want to be part of this. If we don't have more sensitivity than that, I'm not saying you have to become vegans. No, we're not saying that. But damn it to hell, you do it in a humane way. If it takes more money to take care of these animals and let them have an actual life before they are eaten, then that's how we do it. Define us as people, not as barbarians. Now, I know that probably sounds very naive and idealistic, especially to a lot of conservative buddies of mine. I was speaking to one of my conservatives guys, and I was talking about MACA, Make Americans Compassionate to Animals again. He was having a tough time grasping it. I said, look, I know it's not at the top of the list right now, but you need to grasp it. There's no reason why we can't do all things. If we need to eat other animals for our protein, for this, that, and the other thing, we can do that. But we don't have to brutalize hundreds of millions of animals and do it in such an insensitive way that reflects upon us and who we are. And, you know, I posed a hypothetical question. I brought in some Joe Citizens on a Joe Citizen show, just buddies from the softball field. And I brought that up as a hypothetical question. And, of course, they hoo-hooted, oh, aliens, ha, ha, ha. I was brought up as a hypothetical question, but it's not necessarily so hypothetical. We'll have to just stand by and see what happens. But the point is, if there are aliens and they were to come down, how would they judge us? How would they judge us as human beings? How would they judge our humanity? It's one thing to be humane to people, which we're not. We don't even show humanity to people. And part of the reason we don't show humanity to people is because we don't show humanity to animals. We don't show humanity to anything. Some of us do some of the time. Some of us do some of the time, and that's it. But it's widely accepted. If you don't see it, it doesn't matter. If you don't see how they make the sausage, it doesn't matter. If you don't see how they brutalize and terrorize these harmless, helpless animals that have feelings, they have feelings and they have sensitivities and they feel literally and figuratively. If we have zero regard for that, then what kind of a species are we? I don't think a very good one. And frankly, I don't know why I'm part of this species, if that's the case. And, you know, geez, I mentioned this to you once a long time ago, Jiggy. I honestly remember being a young child and thinking these same thoughts way back then. This is before anything was political in the mix. Just the whole idea of war, of nonstop war and the brutality of war. And I really couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 or 7. And I was just scratching my head and looking up at the sky and looking up at the stars and saying, I'm not part of this. I don't understand this. Well, why is anybody like this? Is it like this everywhere? How can it be like this everywhere? How can this be what it is? How can this be all there is? Is it just me, Jiggy? Have I just lost it? Have I just lost a piece of my...
No, I think you are spot on with a lot of this. We've got Roger Homefield with us today, Joe Citizen himself, joecitizenshow.com. And I'm a little behind the scenes. We had our segment with Roger on Tuesday, and I took it upon myself and I uploaded that segment to his YouTube channel, so it's on your YouTube.
Okay.
So if you can at some point put that on the website so people can hear about all the things that you went through with the whole Ivermectin thing. So what did you think of Horst First and his speech last night? It kind of shocked me that he did this on a Wednesday night.
I had no intention of watching his speech. I'm already sick.
Oh, I'm sick of Biden.
I'm already sick. I had no intention of watching a complete demagogue stand up there and fantasize what reality is. He's totally out of his freaking mind. And I really had no intention of putting myself through it. It's hard enough to watch the congressional hearings, although I'm cheering all the time because our people are doing fantastic jobs. Pam Bondi and Rubio, and they all did fantastic jobs. And to watch dirtbags like Schiff, who lied about everything. He said, oh, there were 8 examples of 8 crows. There wasn't one. Oh, there's hard evidence. There's hard evidence that our president is a spy for Russia. He sees it. He's held it in his hand. Complete lies. And how a dirtbag, scumbag like that is allowed to make those lies. For whatever reason, ladies and gentlemen, it's not illegal to lie in the well of the Senate floor. That's why Harry Reid was able to get away with, for all those years, saying that Romney didn't pay his taxes for 10 years or something like that. He kept saying the lie over and over and over again because he could. And when it was all said and done, his answer was, well, it worked. I was able to do it, so I did it. Something is very wrong. I don't see why it should be legal to lie on the well of the Senate floor. That's absolute insanity. That's one of the things that has to go. And look, these people are going to make this country so great. They're going to do term limits. If they don't do term limits with this administration, there never will be term limits. If we had term limits, all the disasters that happened with this last administration would never have happened. Would never have happened. So we've got, if you get term limits, you're going to get actual patriots in there that actually love the country, that are actually doing it because they love the country, not so that they can go in worth 50,000 and come out worth 15 million. So we're going to have term limits. You're going to have paper ballots, one-day voting, voter ID. We're going to have immigration that makes sense, not this chain immigration. And if you know 100 people, they're all citizens, this nonsense, and meritocracy. But I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to tell you something else. There's always 2 sides to certain things. And I'll because there's a big liberal part of me, and that's my heart. And so I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Today, I saw a couple of the young illegals that were brought into court and sat down with the hands behind their back and, you know, the ear put in their ear. And I'm not going to go so far as to say I felt sorry for them, because then you'd call me every name in the book and you'd be correct, because if they've done terrible things. But You have to understand that from this perspective of what I was thinking, is that that's why you have first world countries and third world countries. These young men, they were not brought up in a civil country. They were not brought up by civil parents. They were not brought up by two parents that loved them. They never knew what that was. And a lot of people in those third world countries don't know what that is. That's why they're third world countries. And that's why you don't say everyone is the same and bring third world countries into our country, because they're not from our culture. They do not understand what it's like to be brought up in a loving family. It's not their fault, because they were not brought up with love or civility or education or with a government that had any of those ideals. Of course, it's not our fault either, and that's why they don't belong here. But it's just a reminder, when you see these young men, you have to say to yourself, well, wait a second. If that young man, when he was 2 or 1, had 2 good parents in America, they wouldn't have grown up to be wanton, violent, sadistic people. So we have to understand that. And what we have to do, though, is have a great country where we bring up all our people to be civilized, wonderful, caring, sympathetic, good Samaritans. And when we have a country that's filled with citizens like that, then we can go out and try to help the other countries do the same thing. We have to do it first, and then we can help them become like us. But we can't help them by bringing them over here in their dirtbag dispositions, and that's going to make, everybody equal, equity, yada, blah, all this crap. We're the greatest country in the world because we had a work ethic, and we had Judeo-Christian values, and we had a vision of a mother and a father raising them as Judeo-Christian values, going to school, going to church, Rockwell art. That's right, folks. You have to see it first before it can happen. And that's what we visualized, and that's what we had. We were good people. And then we had Obama. Oh, we're bad. Systemic racism. Bop, 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 bop. Let's bring in a whole bunch of people, third world, from the Mideast. Let's bring a whole bunch of people from all over the world that do not share our values, and that's going to make us a better country. No, it didn't. Not at all. It didn't make us better, and it didn't make them better either. So we're going to have to just suck it up now. We're going to have to tighten the belt with this mass deportation. It's not going to look pretty, and it's not going to be pretty. But it has to happen. And we have to have a population here that is loyal to America, that loves America, that loves the American dream, and that wants American values. And once we have a population that gets back to square one with that, then we can help the rest of the world.
Well, we've got Roger Homefield with us today. Joe Citizen himself. You can get more information, joecitizenshow.com. Well, Roger, I will talk to you next week, my friend.
Yes, you will. And sooner, hopefully. Sooner, hopefully. I have many things to tell you.
Well, feel free to give me a call tomorrow.
I will do. I will do.
All right, brother. I'll talk
All
to
right,
you.
Jiggy. Thanks a lot.
There
Thanks,
you go.
everybody.